Hello and welcome back to Joe and Rich's Struggle with Docker, aka Learning Kubernetes Part 4. My name's Joe Guadagno, and the other side of me, the non talking head right now, is Rich Dudley. So, for the last 3 or 4 uh, grueling episodes, we've been getting Docker to work with our sample application. And if you want to play along, you can check it out at this URL below. So, quick recap, we walked through the application on episode 1, and then we started getting the container to build, and we couldn't get it working using JetBrains Rider. So in episode 2, we went through and got it working with Visual Studio, and then we're able to kind of launch the containers in the web app and the API. We then tried to get the web app to talk to the API app inside containers, and we struggled with that for the rest of episode 2 and all of episode 3. And that was last Thursday. So this weekend, amongst other things, watching the Cardinals get pummeled by Kansas City, I went and did a lot of research on it, and I came across 2 different blog posts which kind of cover a lot of the why. So let me go and share my screen. Share screen, and maybe one day I'll learn the keyboard shortcuts for this. So I found this blog post here that talks about configuring it, and I need to bring that blog post into, we can see it. So what ends up happening, if you look at this diagram here with this Docker container and the ASP.NET Service 1, that's just the first service. So consider that like our API. Or actually, this is the web app. The web app needs to talk to the web API. So the way Docker works is when it builds up the network, or when you do a Docker compose, if you don't specify a network, it builds up a default network for you. And I forgot to turn off notifications. So let me do that. It will build its own network for you. And what ends up happening, it's like a little mini virtual machine where all the machines know each other. So in our case, the web API or the web app can talk to the web API. The challenge with that is the way certificates work. So HTTPS certificate works by resolving the name of the computer it's running on, or computers, and saying that, yes, I say I'm from josephguadagno.net, and this certificate matches. So when the browser says, oh, I want to go HTTPS, it says, hey, server, josephguadagno.net, give me your certificate. It comes back and says, okay, the certificate says it's from josephguadagno.net. How do I really know it's there? There's also a root authority on that certificate. So it goes through and checks the root authority and says, hey, is this certificate valid? They look at the thumbprint and say, yes, this is valid. So then your browser opens up a secure communication between your app or the browser and the web server. So in our case, when we were testing everything, we were testing localhost. So in the ASP.NET Core world with localhost, it will generate a certificate. ASP.NET Core uses the dev cert application, and it will generate a certificate for the application. Within the Docker world, it still generates that. The problem is running within Docker, it's no longer using localhost. When this app, the green box here, is talking to the blue box, it's, in our particular case, if we look at our code here, we were using Context API and Context Web UI. So in our Docker Compose file, we were saying localhost. So localhost won't really work. What works is Context API. This will basically, Docker will create a machine called Contacts API and a machine called Contacts Web UI. So this is the way to connect to it. However, when the browser starts to go to it, so in the example of the web UI, the internal browser, the HTTP client, is going to reach out to this URL. It goes to that URL and says, hey, Contacts API, I want to make sure you're there because I'm validating it because I'm doing the HTTPS. So it comes back and gets the certificate and then says, oh, wait, I'm reaching out to Contacts API, but your certificate says localhost. That's no bueno. So I'm going to throw up the big red X and show an error on the screen. Well, because we're using the HTTP client, we were throwing an exception that was ending up in the browser. So really the only way to fix that is to generate a Contacts API specific certificate and one for Contacts Web UI to allow you to be able to test the communication. Now, in most cases, locally, most people don't bother with that. They will generate the certificates in your integration environment. So in your dev server, your UAT server, your staging server, your production server. You'll test the apps locally, the web API and the web UI to make sure they work locally, build the containers here, but then when you deploy it, you'll deploy with the certificates. So that was my hard-learned lessons with learning to use that. So this blog post, which I'll throw in the chat. Hey, Sean. Hey, Sabuki. So this blog post kind of helped on that. And this blog post was actually based on a talk that Rob Richardson did at NDC Porto and a couple of other places called HTTPS and ASP.NET Core in Docker Linux Container Deep Dive. So I recommend that you watch this video to really explain how to go about doing that or how to go about it. He has a project on his Git repo that kind of walks through. It's a little dated because the talk is from 2019, but you can follow up with it if you want to be able to test locally within Docker. It uses something called MK-Cert or Make-Cert, which is an open source product that kind of gets away from having to know all the details around OpenSSL, which is a way that you can go and create certificates, PEM keys, private keys, etc. So I urge you to go out and take a look at this post. Maybe another stream I'll do at a later talk. I almost got it working just before this talk, but I decided, or my stomach decided, it was more important to eat lunch than to kind of get the rest of this working. One other tool before I turn it over to Rich that I found that was really helpful. Microsoft released a free ebook a while ago called .NET Microservices Architecture for Containerized .NET Applications. And it's a rather lengthy book. It's a couple of hundred pages. I think 40 of them are just but it goes about like how to go about properly using Docker containers, how you architect them for monoliths, et cetera, et cetera. And it has a lot of good helpers like setting up the multi-container, which we started doing here online on page 93 and throughout. Be a lot better than going through and watching, us resuffer through all that. So that being said, I am going to remove my screen, and Rich, if you want to share yours.
Well, yeah, let me share this. We'll all suffer together as Visual Studio has decided to commit harakiri as soon as you went live. So, we're getting it back here. Builds are going slowly. But the demo gremlins have struck here in the in the secret underground bunker.
I had when I was doing the testing just before lunch, I had a Visual Studio is ready to update. Do you want to update? And I'm like, oh, should I? Should I not? Get that little twitch just before a talk or something. One side of your shoulder says no, don't update. The other side says yes, live dangerously. So
YOLO, YOLO, YOLO. Dude, if we weren't into living dangerously, we would have actually learned this stuff before we tried to stream it.
Yep.
So, that's just how it goes. All right. How are we doing here? I got to find where my cursor is. There it is. So as Joe said, we've got some things working. I should be. Am I not?
Nope.
Okay. Well, things are going great. Screen one. Click allow.
There you go.
There we go. Oh, we're going to have a good stream day today. I can already feel it in my bones. So as Joe said just a little bit ago, this has been kind of a frustrating thing. We get the API working just fine. We can call the API from a browser running on our local machine. And then likewise, we have the web UI running individually. Where the heck did my mouse cursor go? There it is. So I have 3 monitors going today. Joe said I can't show the 4Ks because he can't read them. So I've got a third monitor, and I can't keep track of my mouse anymore. So we can get the web thing locally. But when we try to load the contacts, this is where, watch it work now after all this. This is where things fall apart. So I spent the weekend actually, I bought a book, and I'll show it really, because I thought it was really helpful. I don't know the guy who wrote it, but he's apparently a Docker captain. And since I've read about 3/4 of this book, I'm clearly ill again now, and I'm looking forward to my little hat. But this I found, there it is, by Nigel, who I guess is British or something. But this book, I bought it. It's like $10. Don't freak out on the book. I bought it Kindle, and I've been reading through this. This has been very helpful with a lot of debugging steps because being new to Docker, we're both like, why aren't these things talking to each other? So I want to take a few minutes and walk through some of the stuff that we discovered over the weekend while we were trying to debug this. And we entered several circles of hell because I had to debug the things I was doing to debug the thing I was actually trying to do. That might be a familiar story for some of us, but it was fun to be back in the hot seat again. So let me pull up really quick a Docker file here.
Fun,
There
by
we
the
go.
way. He forgot the
What's
air
that?
quotes. Said
Oh,
fun,
fun.
forgot the air quotes.
Yeah, I'm using my hands to try and hunt down my cursor on like 6 feet of monitor here. So, so one of the things that we figured out is these base images right here, the .NET ASP.7.0 base image. Microsoft has been shipping very, very, very thin containers. They don't have anything installed on them. So when it comes time to do some of these debugging steps, you're going to execute a command. It's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about, man. And so if you've never worked in the Linux command line, another book to get is literally called The Linux Command Line. That's been very helpful to me through the years. It'll talk you through how to install tooling and stuff like that on the different distributions. So let's see here. These are all rebuilt containers. I don't know if anything is going to be working on these, but in Visual Studio, if you open up your containers window, and it took me forever to find this thing, I think it's under View, other windows. I think it's in here
You can
somewhere.
actually go to your
Containers. There it is.
output.
What's that?
I was like, you can go to your output window, and then it's a drop down too.
Oh, cool.
So right below where it says errorless containers output contacts API, click on the output, and then there's a drop down list. So where it says show output from, you can say container tools.
Ah, all right. Well, if you like me with the hard way, you can get it under the View menu too.
Yep.
One of the other cool things is interactive terminals that you can execute actually on the container. And I've been doing this. Whoops, I've got two of them open now. You can open two of them onto the same container. Um, when this happens, we are now actually running a Linux command line on the API container. The installation command, some of us may be used to like sudo apt-get or something like that. On the containers that Microsoft is shipping, it's just apt. Um, so we may have to apt install something here. Um, One of the first debugging steps that Joe and I came across is, are your containers actually on the same network? How do we check that? Well, as it turns out, that's kind of easy. Um, we can just execute. Oh, there's another two things. One is you can run an interactive terminal on the container. Some of the debugging steps that we're going to do on container. Some of them we're going to do on host. So checking to see what networks are running, um, and then what's connected to them is something you do on host. So this is just a standard PowerShell terminal here. And I'm going to read a little bit from the book because I tend to get these backwards. So if we go Docker, whoops, network ls is the list command, right? You use that for files as well. Um, we get a list of networks that are running as part of this Docker installation. The standard default one that's usually always running is bridge. So what we want to make sure is anything or everything connected to the bridge network? So we can do that with a Docker inspect bridge, if I got that right. Yes, there we go. Cool beans. This output is like fabulously informative, even if you're only moderately networking. Yeah, Joe, I type docket all the time. I think I'm going to have to alias that in PowerShell, as well as some of my other great typos. So there's a couple cool things that we talk about in this network inspection from Docker. And the first one is, what is our subnet? And you can see Docker sets up its own subnet on the machine, which is you'd expect it to do. It's got to manage all these pods. It does all the NAT. It does everything. Just it is basically part of the Docker daemon is being a switch for containers and the networking. The real part that we're looking for right now is, do we have containers that are attached to the bridge network? And I do not have as fancy terminal as Joe does. I'm going to have to take some terminal fancification lessons from Joe. But if we highlight this, we can see Contacts API is running and it is connected to the bridge network. So is Contacts Web UI. The IP address for the API is 172.17.02. We'll use that in a second. The IP address for the web UI is 17.0.3. Okay, cool. There's a couple other settings to be aware of, and these are explained more in depth in that book. I won't do them justice. First is like, is this the default bridge network? Yes, it is. And secondly, is ICC enabled? And that is inter-container communication, if I remember the abbreviation correctly. The answer is yes, those are enabled. So at this point, I have two containers that are both connected to the same network that should be able to talk to each other, but they don't. Drive you crazy, right? Uh, so let's hop into, oh, there you go. Oh, Joe took ideas from Hanselman, figures. Hanselman's got all the fancy stuff. So let's take a look real quick at some on-image debugging that we can try and do. We're running on the Contacts API, so we may want to try and, just the normal stuff. Ping 172.17.0.3, right? Oh, good. Ping is not found. Great. Is IP shown? Okay, good. So some of the commands that you'll need just quite simply aren't installed. This is kind of easy. Normally what you do if you want to do this over and over and over and over again is put these steps in the Docker file so that they get built when you do these containers. And that way you don't have to yokel around and do apt update on a live video stream. And then do, oh, we gotta wait for it, wait for it, right?
You should generally only do that while you're debugging and remove those steps from the final deployment, because otherwise they'll end up in your production builds.
Are there ways to do dev test and prod environment Docker files? Do you know, Joe? Or is that something
Yep,
we should put on our
that's
list
part
to
of
look
the
into?
Docker compose. You can specify environment variables and or like Docker dash compose dash beta and so on. I can do those
Perfect.
tools.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that. That'll be good. All right, so we've updated our catalogs. We can do apt install. What do you got to install here? This is IP route 2. Okay. This installs some of the IP tooling, especially the routing. Give it just a moment. Yes, we do. My terminal usually hangs at the very end, and so I've got to just close the terminal window and start a new terminal. We'll see if it makes it through. 96. And there we go. I don't know why mine does that. Another mystery. We can just go back to containers. We run API, right? Give me a new terminal window. Okay, cool. It's not the first time I've suffered through that. Great. Now we
It looked
can
like it
do
failed because it was missing when you did the that tool you were installing. It looked like it was looking for a tool that didn't exist.
it's grumpy because I don't have the UI stuff installed. Um, it will install the stuff we need without it, but if we want to, we can go back and install that as well. Um, so no big deal. All right. So what IP address show, IP ADDR show does is it tells you from on the container, I have an IP address. These are the addresses that I'm working through. There's a local host on every container, which is why you can't use localhost to address your local machine from a container, because when the container's running, it's like, wait, I'm the local host, right? And so it's got a loop back on there, LO for the loop back, right? And then here's our 172.17.02 bridged to there, bridged through to the host. Okay, cool. We know that ping is not installed, so we can do apt install iputils dash ping, and I have these on a cheat sheet over here to my right. Um, like all the best ones would. Okay, cool. Dig it. So ping worked. So let's try and ping 172.17.0.3, which should be the web UI because we're on the API here. Cool beans. This is the point where things start to get like really stuff is working. These shouldn't have any reason not to talk to each other. Let's flip open a terminal window on the web UI real quick. Cool. Oh, look, all the errors from the last time I tried to do that. Dig it. There's no real magic to these interactive terminal windows. If you notice, all that it's doing is it's opening a PowerShell terminal and it's running Docker exec dash IT. Dash IT stands for interactive terminal. And this is the container ID right here that you can just copy right out of the thing, whatever, wherever you want to get it from. And then bash, it starts the interactive bash terminal. So there's no magic. You could execute that. Actually, if I want to, I could execute that in a terminal window and get the same thing going on and have the same functionality. I just like doing it in Visual Studio because I don't know, small letters and minimal screens are exciting, I guess. So, okay, let's check here. IP, do I have anything installed here? No, I do not. So we do apt, whoops, update, and then we
Might as well
give that
install
a
both of them
moment.
at the same time.
I would if, oh, I should have done ping first. Oh, look at that. Whatever. It worked. Oh, this is the update. Right, right. Yeah, yeah. I'm going to do ping first because it doesn't crap out. Apt, install, IP utils, ping. Good call, Joe. Yeah, we'll do this. Yes. Okay. Rock on. Okay, and then now we can do apt install. What was it? IP route 2, right?
And what I was suggesting for those of you that don't know is you can actually install more than one at a time. So you do
Oh,
app space install space IP tool whatever space IP tool ping, and then it'll install both of them at the same time, or one after the other, I should say.
okay. When I write code in C#, it is kind of procedural on multiple lines. That's just how my brain goes. I know some of you guys thinking like nested ternaries and stuff, but yeah. All right, let's get another terminal window here on the web UI. And again, it was complaining about the a UI element that I installed that earlier, and you know what? It had zero difference on anything working. So whatever, we just let it fail. Okay, IP address show. Great. We are connected to the bridge network. We have a loopback here, and there is our published IP address. So rock on. Right now, we should be able to ping 172.17.0.2. Cool. So the containers completely can talk to each other. They're on the same network, they're bridged. And at this point, Joe and I are like, what is going on? So he went and looked into that and came up with the certificate idea, which I hope is it. So let me see. There was one more thing that I wanted to show here really quick before we try and get off onto where did that go? Oh no, was that it? Oh yeah. I think we've got this. Let's go here. Docker port. Yeah, one more. Some of my best typos are in public are always like potential HR violations too. So that's always exciting. Docker port contacts API. This should show us the ports that are being listened on. So great. Um, this command runs on the host and it just says this container, which is the container name. This is listening on port 80, and that is mapped 0000 is like the global traffic from wherever. Basically, traffic is only going to come from the host at this setup, and it's mapped to this port on the host. 443 likewise is mapped there. We can do the same thing with contacts web UI. And there we go. And as I found out, I believe this command is case sensitive. Yeah, it's case sensitive, which is fun. So don't put a lot of shift key because you'll wear out yourself when you're doing that stuff. So ports are open, everything's on the same network, they can ping one another, all those kinds of debugging commands went through. Awesome possum. Why aren't these working? Well, who knows? And again, our massive failure, right? When we go to the wherever stuff is, and we try to load, we've got our contacts running here, and we can even iterate contacts. But again, this is the host browser connecting through to the container. Cool. There's Eugene. That works fine. This is the host browser connecting to the contacts viewer. Now when we hit this contacts button, we have the web UI container is going to try and call the API in the container using that bridge network. Boom. This is where the wheels fall off always. So those are my debugging steps, and most of my Sunday and Monday spent with those. So Joe, we were going to what? Go into try and setting up Kubernetes and do a little introduction on Kubernetes to take the next steps. Is that?
Yeah, we got about a
Yeah.
half hour. We could hopefully,
Okay.
not based on our track record, be able to get something going. Both of us only
Although the way,
very bare minimum install with Kubernetes.
okay, I'm going to stop these containers. This could be a mistake. We'll see if Visual Studio decides to take a nosedive again.
I would just hit the stop from the top.
Oh
Stop.
yeah, you can do that too. Yeah. Stop, and then stop the API up here. Looks like that's going on. So, Kubernetes Here we go. What is going on? Nothing is happening. Container's running, but I can't stop it up there. Okay, that's cool. Let's do it down here. Um, so Kubernetes is the next step. It was our ultimate destination. I think based on all the successful Hello World examples we did, I was sort of lulled into thinking that was going to be super easy. Um, Kubernetes is one of many container orchestration options out there. It may be the best known. It has a ton of momentum. Docker Swarm is another one. We could have just as easily decided to do Docker Swarm. OpenShift is a third one, and those are probably the top three in that order: Kubernetes, Docker Swarm, and OpenShift. Um, each cloud provider has their own thing as well. Amazon calls theirs EKS. What's Azure's, Joe? Is it Azure Kubernetes or is it Azure Containers?
I think it's Azure Container Services.
Okay, so Azure Containers. Amazon also has other container services. There's ECS, which is the Elastic Containers. That is using something Docker Swarmish that they've sort of rolled themselves. Then there's EKS, which is Elastic Kubernetes. And that is the one, if you're doing Kubernetes on Amazon, that is one of the two options. It's the partially managed form of it. You can also run Kubernetes on AWS yourself. You would do it in EC2 containers, and it would be just like running it in virtual machines. So there is a two main options to get Kubernetes on Amazon. The great Corey Quinn has a couple of blog posts about the 17 ways to run containers in Amazon, and then a follow up 17 more ways to run containers on Amazon. So at this point, you're close to 40 different ways you can actually run containers on AWS. But the two that we're looking for, or the one that we're going to look at later on, is EKS, Elastic Kubernetes. Yeah. Oh, it's AKS. It's Azure Kubernetes. Okay. Dig it. We're not going to screw that up at all. EKS and AKS, like that's we're, and then of course Google. Kubernetes came from Google, so Google's base is actually Kubernetes. I don't know what the name of it is because I don't do much in Google at all. So let's find one of the 97 browser windows I have open around. That is, who knows? All right, we'll open another one. What's one more browser window going to do among friends, right? Yep. Kubernetes is found at the wonderful address kubernetes.io. And again, it is container orchestration. That's what it does. You can build your containers. We chose Docker to build the containers. There are a number of different tools that you can also use to build containers. Kubernetes is not one of them, though. They basically recommend just use Docker. And Docker has a big momentum as far as that's concerned. Both of these are free for the individual hobbyist. I don't think you have to pay for Docker until you're technically a medium business, which is, I think, 250 employees and or 10 million a year. So there's a lot of growth you can do before you need to worry about really paying for Docker, although they do nag you periodically about that. So running Kubernetes on a local machine is sort of like a why? What are you doing that for kind of scenario, but it's a great way for learning. Um, the as we talked before, Azure has AKS, Amazon has EKS. On your local machine, you're going to use something called Minkube. I have that installed. It wasn't running because I wasn't planning on it going so deep in this, but I can just see if maybe it is running.
How'd you go about installing them, Rich?
That's a great question. Oh, good, it is running. Okay, cool. So they have, again, if you're on Windows, actually, most of this stuff grew up on Linux machines. So if you're on Windows, you definitely want to be running WSL2. The install is a little bit smoother. Macs sometimes have problems with some of these things. So installing it was pretty easy. Let me find that out. There are a couple of ways to do it. Where did it go? Out. Sorry, I just hit my hand on the thing. Where do we go? Here. Installing, getting started, learning environment. Here we go. We have a learning environment. So there's two parts to Kubernetes that we're going to need to make stuff run on our local machine. There's kube control, I think is how that's pronounced, KUBECTL, and
Some
that
people
allows
say
us to run.
cuddle.
What's that? Or
Some
kube
people say
cuddle?
cuddle.
I'm sure there have been fisticuffs over the correct pronunciation of that.
Yep.
And if I'm screwing it up, somebody just throw out in the comments that I'm messing it up. So kube control, that's got to be on everything. That is running on our local machines. That same utility will also run in the cloud or wherever you're hosting your Kubernetes. Minikube is the other half of that runs. And all that we have to do is click through to this. Um, the nice thing is, like, what you need to run this stuff, two CPUs, 2 gigs of free memory, 20 gigs of free disk space. I mean, this stuff works great on a Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pis are just a bit of a pain in the butt to carry around with you, so I have it running on my laptop. But this stuff is definitely cool that you can run it on a very low powered machine. Um, so a lot of what you'll do here, cube cuddle. I was thinking cuddle like cuttlefish, but okay, I guess we can hug it out if we need to. Um, you can use PowerShell to install it, which is great. Of course, they've got a little copy command. There's also a downloader, or you can download it the way I did with Chocolatey and just do Choco install Minikube, which is kind of cool. So once you get that installed, you start the cluster, and then let's see here. I'm going to pull this browser window up over here so that I can type some of these
Before we
commands.
get crazy into Minikube, why did you
Yeah.
use that versus the Kubernetes that's available inside of Docker Desktop? Go on some of the later versions
Um,
and click settings. You can turn on Kubernetes right there.
oh, yeah. Let's bring that up, right? Oh, go back here to where's up here's the settings, right? There we go.
It's a little gear icon next to your name
Yep.
at the top bar.
Yeah. So why did we do that? I don't know. Minikube seemed like more the way that we would be running in the cloud. It seemed like one step closer to the final type of environment. But we could run Kubernetes here inside of Docker Desktop, which is pretty cool. That all we'd have to do is check that. I'm sure it works fine. It
Yeah,
just seemed like Minikube was one step closer. What were you saying, Joe?
there is a little difference. So using it within Docker Desktop, you're tied to that specific version. So version 1.27.2, and you're tied to when Docker makes any changes to Docker Desktop in order to get that. When you use Minikube is in theory updated by Kubernetes, so they're more in sync. So if you want to stay more latest and greatest, you stick with Minikube because it's tied a lot more closely to Kubernetes. Where Docker Desktop, it's kind of Kubernetes is an add-on, so to speak.
Gotcha. And so the version that I installed, what was it, last week or something, is 1.31.1, and inside of Docker is 1.27.2. So they're four minor versions and an untold number of third point versions behind. So I'm sure it's fine. What could go wrong? Um, So as with all of these tools, you spend a lot of time at the, oh, and I lost my browser window again. You spend a lot of time on the command line, which is sort of foreign for us if you've been a longtime .NET Windows
Or a
developer.
Windows guy or
Yeah,
girl.
yeah, guy, girl, y'all, Windows y'all. It's sort of foreign. So it's been a little bit of like, hey, this is kind of cool stuff. I see where the Linux guys were going 15 years ago. So once we get this stuff installed, we can start. Oops, here we go. We can run some checks. Obviously, we know that Minikube is running. That's great. That's probably why my machine is always so slow now. If I type that right. Okay, cool, cool. We installed Minikube. This is how Minikube will install Cube Control or Cube Cuddle, if we're going to hug it out. Hopefully. Doesn't seem to be doing a whole lot there. All right. There we go. There we go. Couldn't get. Oh, you got to be running in a. Yeah. All right. Couldn't get current server API group list. Huh? Who knows? Like I said, we've got to debug the things we're doing to debug the thing we're doing. Okay, can I X out of this? Can I C out of this? There we go. Control C. I should have Cube Cuddle running here. So let's see if we got.
It's probably running inside of the Docker container, so you'll need to open up that prompt.
Oh.
So you can go to your Docker desktop, look for the container running Minikube. And
I don't think I have a Minikube container. Yeah. Okay. What's it complaining about? Couldn't get server API group list. Oh, this is great. What's going on here? You don't have required permission. Contact the administrator of the authorization policy for the computer. That would be me. And the administrator is befuddled.
So start.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't actually start it yet, though. When you just did, there it goes.
Yeah, there we go. This should hopefully do it. Oh, good. Look, Minikube 1.31.2 is available. Using Hyper-V, exiting due to provider Hyper-V not running. What? Oh. Let me bail on this here. Provider Hyper-V not running. All right, let's Windows features on and off. It was running. Probably should have rebooted before we tried this. It's probably the problem. So there's Hyper-V. Okay, cool. Hyper-V management tool. Hyper-V platform is the other Hyper-V down here. Windows Hypervisor platform.
Should be what you
I
need.
got nothing. Yeah, I would think that. All right. Well, let's go to the wisdom of the ancients here and see. Unable to determine. Oh, yeah, let's just do this. We're going to copy. The heck is the mouse?
Oh,
there it is.
you know what you should do? Shut down
What?
Terminal and open up Terminal as administrator. That's probably why.
Good point. Let's try that. Let's try that. Clearly, running as an administrator inside of a lot of corporate environments is going to be totally okay with a lot of InfoSec teams. So I'm sure this will not be a problem. Let's see if we can Minikube start that.
Minikube start, and right now it's creating the Docker container on my machine.
There we go. Hopefully, updating the Hyper-V Minikube VM. There we go. Start host failed. IP not found. Is yours working, Joe?
So far it is.
Oh. Updating the running Hyper-V. Okay. Error provisioning the guest. The above advice does not help. What above advice? Exiting? There is no advice.
It's weird.
All right, if you're running, what's that?
So it's weird. I can't find the IP address.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good. Um, I don't know if you're running, Joe. Do you want to take over and show the drive us home for the last 15 minutes?
Sure. Let's see.
Okay.
So share screen, window, entire.
This is pair programming at its finest.
So let's zoom in a little bit on this. A couple of control pluses, and let's hide you, get you back up, go full screen so we can see it. So I did the mini cube start, and I get a lot of icons. Look at all those icons there. They went a little bit overboard. Celebrating here, there's a download. Give you the option of turning it off. It automatically found Docker. It said Docker with root privileges. And then starting to pull down the base image. This took a minute because, as you can see, it's downloading a little bit over 800 gig. Then it created a Docker container with 2 CPUs and 16 gig of memory. Prepared Kubernetes 1273 running on Docker 24, generate certificates, built up the plane, set up the security, then it configured the networks, then it ran it, and now it has all the storage. So now it's kind of done. I built it out. Let's look at the container. Inside of my Docker, you can see I now have a mini cube. Oh, guess I forgot to stop these. Let's see, this is the image it's running. So you can see all the ports. It's running on port 22, 2376, 30, whatever those ports are for. Click on this and I can see everything that's running inside Podman. So it looks like things are going. By the way, this is another way you can get in the terminal by clicking on here, and then I can do all the same things that Rich was doing just within the Docker desktop. Okay, so now that I got it working, let me pull over the other screen and see what this says. So next thing would be to launch, open up a new tool window and run this. So let's see what that shows us. Where's my terminal? I'm just going to do tab, create a new one. MiniQ dashboard, enabling dashboard, verifying the health, launching a proxy, verifying the proxy. It's funny because it's got the emoji like it's thinking for it. Oh, cool. Nothing to display here. Kind of like a lot of the content we've been giving. There's nothing to display here. So we have our cron jobs, daemons, any deployments. So there's nothing here now. So the next thing for us to do would be really to create, from my understanding, the deployments for the web API and the web UI, right? So Kubernetes pod is a group of one or more containers tied together for the purposes of administration and or networking. The pod, and I'm just reading this text right here, a Kubernetes deployment checks on the health of your pod and restarts the container if it terminates. So we'd want to use the kubectl create command to create a deployment that manages a pod. That's a lot of text right there, and I don't know what it really means. So let's see, we're creating a deployment, calling it hello node instead of hello world. Looks like we're using an imagery or a particular image. This we'd probably want to change to our web server and then expose those ports. So let's try and do that. So I'm going to go back here. Let's get you down. So let's make sure I got kubectl working. And I do. So see if I have any deployments, which I shouldn't have. Get deployments. None. Okay, so the next would be to create one. So if I look at this syntax, let's get my window here. And let's scroll up so it can be above me. There it goes. And we're going to do kubectl create deployment. And let's call this web node. I don't know if the name means anything. And we're going to use image equal to, let's get this image here. Let's do the API first. So contacts API. So let's go change this to contacts API node. And the image is going to be contacts API. That's our image. This is the one we want to pull in. And then I don't know what the rest of it is. So let's go and see what happens when we do that. It created it. So let's go and get deployments. I see it. 0 of 1 ready, 1 up to date, 1 available. I think we did something. Let's see. Oh, but it says should be similar to this. So I don't think I actually started it.
Is an automatic start one of those flags that we kind of skipped over there on the end?
I mean, might have. Let's see. I think that's just the image, and this is telling you to run that. So it could be, that could be like the ASP.NET run that's at the bottom.
Yeah.
Let's see if there's anything else in here. Nope, nothing else listed there. See if we have any pods. Yeah, it has one in there. Wonder how we started. So let's go kubectl or loop. Seem better.
All the best typos are HR violations, man.
So we got guests, get deployments. We already got that. I wonder if there's. Let's just do kubectl by itself to see if there's any other help. So we got get. We can get, edit, delete. I don't see anything to start. Oh, we can execute a command inside the container. So maybe that's where we want to go. Look at here in the web API. We did, where's our Docker file? You might want to do that. Maybe. That basically starts ASP.NET listening on that port.
Trying to see, or is that similar to the interactive terminal where it started bash?
Yeah, so let's, what was that? Execute.
Exact, yeah, wasn't it? There it is.
Exact. Okay. I'm guessing I have to provide the container name or something. Yeah. Kubectl execute pod. What was my pod name? Contacts. Ooh. Yeah, that's going to copy that one out.
Yeah.
And I want to x.net app / contacts API.dlo. It's deprecated.
Of course it is.
They deprecate. All he said was.
Well, it's saying that it not found. Pod is not found. So maybe you don't put the word pod in there. Maybe you just put the pod name after exact. There we go.
Execute pod command successfully remove use. Oh. I'm gonna do this, it looks like. Nope.
Wait, what? That's not the name you're giving it, though. It says container. Oh, the container of contacts API is not found. It's looking for the Docker container?
I don't know, but that one didn't even start. Oh, wait. Did I stop that one? That shouldn't matter because, well, let's start those and see.
We've got 4 minutes left, so we may end on a cliffhanger again this week, Joe. Does it start?
Good. So you keep getting visitors.
So same JoeG time, same JoeG station. Join us.
Yeah, that dash is not the right command.
Yes, it's
use pod execute pod execute pod. Maybe I need to put it in quotes? Question mark? Nope. Well, that looks better. It highlighted it in blue.
Yep.
This container not found. Huh. Well, at least we got somewhere. We got a pod. Ooh, error image pull. So I guess I edited the pod incorrectly. Maybe that's why. The deployment is there, but when I created the pod, it looks like it wasn't able to find that pod with the error image pull. So gotta see what we did or what I did wrong there. And Rich has got to get his Minikube working.
It's running now. Minikube delete is the command to clean up the mess and start fresh.
Cool.
Yeah.
I might end up doing that and figuring out what we did wrong here. Cool. Well, on that note, I am going to remove the screen. Let's put you back in the middle. So I'm staring at the camera, not the side profile of my head. That was all for today. We actually made a lot more progress today than we have in any other day.
Well, it's because we punted on what we were doing. So,
well,
thank you, Sean. Thanks, Suzuki. Thank you, Michael.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go give Jason Bilal a big cube cuddle if you can find him, Michael.
Yeah. Say hi to him for us.
Yeah.
All right, Joe.
See you later.
See everybody on Thursday.